And in Luke 12, verse 20, it says, "But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided?" And when I see that, it reminds me of the question that I asked myself. If God were to require my life at that moment in time, what could I say that I did that was purposeful to Him in this earth realm? And for me, I could have said, going to church or serving in different areas in church. But that was not the only thing that God purposed me and created me to do. It was something more intentional than that. And that's a question that all of us need to ask ourselves. If God were to require your life right now, what can you say that you have done according to His purpose? And if your answer does not suffice, then this is the moment where you need to be asking God, what is it that you've created me for? Luke 12, 16 through 21 says, "And he spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do? Because I have no room where to bestow my fruits. And he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater. And there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." There is something that God created each and every last one of us to do in this earth realm. And when you think about Luke 12, I could see myself in that passage, in that parable, because a lot of times the things that hinder us from living a purpose-filled life or living our lives according to His purpose will be things like success, possessions, positions, promotions, or even rebellion or resistance, whichever category you fall in. These are the things that have hindered us from realizing the fact that God has called us according to His purpose. So let's just discuss verses 18 and 19. And he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. And this is a lot of our lives. We see the success that we have. We see the possessions that we have, or even the positions and promotions that we are getting. And we just think to ourselves like, wow, like we're doing so well. We should just sit back, enjoy life, take it easy, and just continue in the ways that we've been going. But unfortunately, and especially for myself, I had gotten to a place that I was so comfortable that I no longer desired to know and no longer asked God what it was that He called me to. And because of that, I was not sowing any of my time, attention, or my gifts in that direction. Everything else got my time, everything else got my attention, until one day something did get my attention. And in 2021, we found out later that year that my sister was diagnosed with leukemia. And when my family and I found out that my sister was diagnosed, I can remember saying to myself in that moment, oh my gosh, like Like, I really don't have the faith to believe God for this. Like, I didn't want to hear people telling me, you know, the outcomes or the chances. I just really could not handle that moment. And what I didn't realize was that God was trying to expose things in me that needed to come out of me, and things that he wanted to work in me for the thing that he was going to reveal to me. And for me, realizing that was such a humbling experience, because I believe that I was a person of great faith, and I was. But I believe that over the past few years of my life, for whatever reason, I got into this place where I no longer could believe as strongly for situations that I was believing God for as much as I could for others. And I could tell you what the Word of God says, I could believe what the Word of God says for you, but I think that I had come to a place in my relationship with Christ that I was treating my relationship in a different way, than I treated it for other people. And I saw other people's relationship with God and other people's relationship with Christ differently than I saw mine. It was this strange relationship that I was beginning to have. And honestly, it was becoming something where I felt like I was having to assist God with what I was asking him for. And also, it was where God began to expose something else in me, was that I had control issues. When I say control issues, I'm not saying like trying to control other people, but I definitely tried to control situations. And something that I was beginning to find myself doing was I would pray and ask God to do something or ask God for something, but I would get out of prayer and begin to try to figure out how I could help in that situation or figure out what I could do in that situation. And what God revealed to me in that was that whenever I was doing that, he had no place in my life to be God, because I was too busy being God to myself. And as long as I was God to myself, he could not do what it was that I was asking him to do, because I was too busy trying to figure out how I could do it. And God used that time when my sister was diagnosed not to just expose a problem or an issue that I had. He was trying to also reveal to me the solution. And he was that solution. My relationship with him, the faith that I was going to need, all of those things were going to be things that I needed in order for him to prepare me mentally for what he wanted me to do. And I can remember my sister, she was actually receiving chemo, and she kind of like checked me about it, and she said something like, you know, Ashley, you're not my God. Whatever God is going to do, he's going to do it. And it was because I was trying to figure out what I could have done or what I could do to help her in this situation. Like, I honestly felt like if I would have fasted the night that we found out that she could potentially have cancer, I felt like that could have changed the outcome. And it was so perverted in my thinking to think that I could control that situation. And, you know, even when I thought I was going to be a donor and when I realized that I wasn't, that was so difficult for me. It literally made me more depressed, because everything that I could have had my hand in to try to control the situation, it was almost like God was just showing me like, there's nothing you can do. It was like he was just taking me out of every position that I could have any type of control in. And the more that began to happen, the more and more God was bringing me closer to the realization that I didn't have control. And there were like two different situations that were really serious during that time. And it got to the point where one night my mom and I, we were just crying for like hours. And we were crying together for hours, and then we went separately and just continued to cry for hours. And around 5 a.m., I said, okay, it's time for me to pray. Like, I need to pray. And in that prayer, I remember saying to God, you know, God, you're going to have to be God. Like, you're going to have to do it. And the amount of peace that came over me in that time was unbelievable. You know, when Philippians 4 tells us to be anxious for nothing, but by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, make our requests known to God. And the peace of God, like the peace of God rested on me. It was so real. It was so comforting. And that was just the first preview of God showing me that when I loosed control, that he would then take control. And not only take control, but the amount of pressure that I was feeling, I no longer had to feel that. Because when I casted my cares on him, I didn't feel that heaviness. I didn't feel that burden that I felt. And when the second situation happened, that's when I told God, you know, God, there's literally nothing I can do in this situation. Like, I literally have absolutely no control over this situation. And like, you're going to have to do it. And I relinquish control. I relinquish control. And when I said that, just like the other time, I knew that my sister was going to be okay. I knew the amount of peace I felt was enough for me to say, I don't ever want to be in control. Like, no more. Like, I don't want this. And that was a big step for me to take, because that was repairing the relationship or the perspective that I had with God, the relationship and the mindset that I had in approaching God in prayer. And I needed that, because everything that was going to happen after that was going to happen by faith. So God had to restore my faith. And as a matter of fact, he strengthened my faith in that moment. And what he did going forward, he began to speak to me in different ways. And that was something that I needed, as well as other things that I needed in order to just shift me in my thinking and change my mindset and prepare me for what God was about to do. And after finding out that my sister was diagnosed, I remember I started out my day the same way every day. I would cry during my planning period. And then after that, I would just like turn it on. I would be the upbeat teacher that I was, and, you know, smile and make sure everybody was doing good. And I remember, you know, during my lunch period, I normally didn't eat lunch during my lunch period. So I had students that would come in and they would need prayer, and we would pray together. And I was just trying to operate as normal as I could. But after my sister's transplant, a month later, I had a situation where I was off of work for like 2 weeks. And when I went back, I just remember saying, like, I am so tired. I am so extremely exhausted. And God, I really don't know if I can keep doing this. And that's when I think God was able to speak to me. He was really able to just speak to me subtly and let me know that I was not going to go back to work the next year. And it just seemed like one thing after another just kept happening. And really, with natural eyes, it would just look like, oh my gosh, everything is working against me. But with spiritual eyes, God was beginning to reveal to me that those things weren't working against me. Those things were actually working for me. And Romans 8:28, that's what I was living off of the past 4 years of my life. And that particular year, it was stronger than ever. It was more real for me that all things work together for my good. And that's because I'm called according to his purpose. So if one less thing happened to me, I would not be sitting here having this conversation with you. I needed all of those things to happen, because all of those things were enough to push me to make the decision that I needed to make. And by the end of the school year, it got so bad to the point where I would go and sit in my car because I had nothing else to give. I was that exhausted. I was that overwhelmed. And I knew God was just preparing me. He was already dealing with me. My mindset was already beginning to change, and I no longer was in this comfortable place at work. It was so uncomfortable, and I needed to get in that place of discomfort, because it was the thing that was going to make me make the decision that I was making. And I remember one night, the night before, I actually needed to make a decision about whether I was going to go back or not. I remember I was either in prayer or I was just sitting there, but God showed me numbers on my contract. And I remember saying, I'm not going to sign it. And when I went in the next day and I sat down and I saw my contract, it was the exact number that God showed me the night before. And I couldn't believe it. And I remember thinking in that moment, oh my gosh, I know what I said I was going to do, but honestly, I'm too afraid to do it. And so I was making a decision in that moment to just give it another year, just give it another chance. And I remember hearing the Holy Spirit saying, "What are you doing?" And I remember, it was just like, I'm doing what I have to do. I'm too scared. I don't know what not coming back looks like. And that night I sent my friend a message, and I don't know if I sent it the wrong way or if she read it the wrong way, but she was just congratulating me on stepping out on faith. And, she was just saying how excited she was for me. And this is something that we both had been talking about and praying about. And I just remember getting teary-eyed and kind of just sad about the fact that that was not my reality. And I remember I sent that back to her, and I was just like, man, like, no, I actually didn't do it. And, just feeling bad and feeling, I don't know, just feeling this deep sadness. And that night and early that morning, I was just in deep prayer. And, later on that day, I went to work and I let them know that I wasn't coming back. And one of the things that I told them, I said, mentally and emotionally, I'm not okay. I've not been in this place before, and I really need to check on myself. But the one most important factor that I did share with them before I left was, I know God is calling me to something, and I really need to see what that is. And that was a bold statement for me to make, because I wasn't confident enough, and I didn't have the faith initially to do something like that. Before my sister was diagnosed, I was in a good place. I was fine. I was just like, the man in the parable. He was just, let's eat, let's take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. And I had no urgency. I had no desire to seek God as to what my purpose was. I had no desire to even walk in purpose. And I had gotten so lost in a place where, all I could do was serve everyone else's purpose, serve everyone else's vision, and just get to the place where I felt like I didn't have one of my own. And that was such a trick of the enemy. And there's nothing wrong with serving others and helping others. The problem comes in when we feel like that God has not created us specifically for his purpose. And that's the way I was living. And in Luke 12, verse 20, it says, "But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided?" And when I see that, it reminds me of the question that I asked myself. If God were to take my life at that moment in time, what could I say that I did that was purposeful to Him in this earth realm? And I had no answer. I didn't have an answer that was meaningful enough. I didn't have an answer that sufficed. And for me, I could have said, going to church or serving in different areas in church. But that was not the only thing that God purposed me and created me to do. It was something more intentional than that. And that's a question that all of us need to ask ourselves. If God were to require your life right now, what can you say that you have done according to His purpose? What can you say that you've done that He created you to do in this earth realm? And if your answer does not suffice, then this is the moment where you need to be asking God, what is it that you've created me for? What is your purpose for my life in this earth realm? And a lot of us need to get to that place. We need to get uncomfortable. We need to get out of this mindset. Let's take it easy. Let's eat, drink, and be merry. And it's not that God doesn't want us to enjoy our lives, but it is in fact more to just enjoying your life. The reason you were created was for you to bring Him glory. The reason you were created was for you to do His purpose in this earth realm, to do His will. I mean, just like a lot of you, I was so busy making my job look good, making other people's purpose that they were created for. I made them look good. I knew how to do that very well. And just like that man who went and built a bigger barn and began to store all of his fruits in this barn, a lot of us are doing that. We're putting all of our time somewhere else. We're putting all of our gifts somewhere else. And we're not investing any of our time, any of our gifts in the purpose that He's created us for. Isaiah 55:11 says that His word will accomplish whatever He sends it out to do. So if you think that God's purpose is not going to get done in this earth realm because you won't be obedient to do it, please don't think that it won't get done. As a matter of fact, the hardest thing for me to even think about as far as like not doing whatever He told me to do is the fact that He'll get someone else to do it. And the B part of Luke 12:20 says, then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? And to me, the worst thing is seeing someone else be obedient to God over the thing that I refuse to do. And that is hard. I don't know how bad that makes anyone else feel, but it made me feel that's the thing that drives me to urgency, that God, I want you to use me in this earth realm. I don't want to leave here full. I don't want to leave this earth not being obedient to your purpose. And God won't wait for you to die for Him to do that. He can also allow you to see someone else do what you refuse to do. And that's what Mordecai was trying to tell Esther. Don't think that if you don't go to the king to try to speak up for God's people, that God is not going to send deliverance. Basically, what he was saying is that if you don't fulfill the purpose that God has created you for, He will send someone else to do it, because God's purpose will be accomplished in this earth. And not only that, he also explained to her that your position is not going to save you from what will happen. He said, just because you're in the palace doesn't mean that you're going to be safe. And for you, I'm saying just because you're in the position that you're in, or you have the business that you have, or you have the job that you have, it does not mean that if you choose to be disobedient, or if you refuse to do what God has purposed you to do in this earth, don't think that your position is going to save you. Don't think that your business is going to save you. Don't think that your promotion is going to save you. God's purpose will be accomplished in this earth, but you just won't benefit from it. As a matter of fact, it even went so far as to say, Mordecai even said to Esther that your family will be destroyed for it. You don't know what your obedience to God's purpose that will save your family, that will help not destroy your family, that could create something for generations to come. And honestly, that thing shook Esther. It shook her to obedience. She was so obedient to it that she was willing to die about it. And this point in our lives, we should want to live the rest of our lives doing what we have been created to do, doing what his purpose is. Because the thing is, I spent enough time trying to serve my purpose. I spent enough time trying to do my will. But I wanted to no longer do that. And Luke 12:21 says, "So is he that layeth up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God." So every time we sow more of ourselves, more of our time, more of our attention to what we have going on, to our business, to our purpose, to our will, or to someone else's business or someone else's purpose or someone else's will, this is what it looks like. We are sowing more treasure to ourselves and not to God. And when we do that, we would have left this earth completely unpurposeful as far as what he created us to do in this earth realm. And sometimes a lot of us are blinded by success. We see that we are successful in certain areas, and just because you're successful, it doesn't mean that that's God's purpose for you. And for Paul was blinded by his success. Paul was very successful as a Pharisee, and because of that, he could not receive what Jesus was trying to give to those that were around him. So his success previously blinded him. But when God took those scales off his eyes, he began to see God's purpose for his life. And for a lot of us, we should not allow success to blind us. We should not be blinded by our success. And I think that I could say the same thing. I could not see myself not doing what I was normally doing. I spent all of my time and attention in areas that had nothing to do with God's purpose for my life. And it was because I was successful. I was getting the raises. I was, getting the awards and the acknowledgement for my service to that position that I was in. But because I was giving all of myself to those areas, I had nothing else to give to God's purpose for my life. And because of that, I could not see what God was trying to show me. I let that success blind me from what God's purpose was for my life. And it took that conversation with God. And for Paul, Jesus had to have been saying, it's hard for you to kick against the pricks. Like you can't keep going against what is trying to correct you. Like it's going to hurt, it's going to be difficult, but you can't keep going against what's trying to correct you, or what's trying to tell you to do the right thing, or is trying to tell you to go in the direction I'm telling you to go in. And so the direction that Paul was going in, he was going in the direction of his success. He was going in the direction of his purpose and his plans. But God was telling him that as long as he was doing that, that was the same as him kicking against the prick and going in the opposite direction, or not trying to go in the direction that God was telling him to go in. That direction was his success. God's direction for him was the purpose that he created him for. And so a lot of us are kicking against the pricks. I know I was doing what I wanted to do. I was going in the direction I wanted to go in. I was doing what I purposed to do. And I wasn't allowing myself to be corrected. I wasn't allowing myself to allow that correction to push me in the direction that God was telling me to go in. So God used several things, from my sister's situation to my own situations, to different things that were happening around me. Everything that appeared to be working against me, all of those things were actually working to get me to the place that God could speak to me and reveal his purpose to me, and I actually obey. Because honestly, the regret that I would have had is that I did not do what I was created to do, that what God sent me to this earth to do, that I left not doing it, and that someone else actually was more obedient to do something I was created to do. And had he not exposed the fact that I had a lack of faith to begin with, had God not exposed the fact that I had control issues, he could not work those things out of me so that he could work faith in me, so that he could work submission in me, so that I could be obedient to do what he called me to do in this earth realm. And I believe that all of those things happened not because he wanted my feelings to be hurt, not because he wanted me to be overwhelmed or depressed, but it was because he wanted me to do what he created me to do. He wanted me to live a life that he could say is pleasing to him, that he could say, well done to. And so when I came off my job, that was one of the conversations that we had was, okay, God, what do you want me to do? I don't know what you're going to do. All I know is I trust you to do it through me. I trust you to do it for me. I trust you. And when I submitted to that, I've never felt more purposeful in my life, and joy and peace and excitement about what it is that God has created me to do in this earth realm. And I don't just desire that for myself. I desire that for everyone. I desire that for those who are around me, even for you that are across the screen listening to my testimony. I desire that for us all. And I believe that that's the reason that God created this time and this space, is for us to be able to encourage each other and hear from different people and hearing their testimonies, so that it could motivate us to seek God about what his purpose is for our own lives and for your lives. And I think that the more that we come together and the more that we hear, the more encouraged we'll be to seek God in that way, and not only just seek him for his purpose for our lives, but actually obey and do what it is that he's created us to do in this earth realm. And maybe you can turn around and do the same for someone else. Thank you so much for even sitting and listening to me. I appreciate your time, and I do not take it lightly. And I pray that something in this conversation was helpful to you and would help motivate you to seek God, and to pique a curiosity in you that will cause you to ask God what his purpose is for your life. And hopefully you will meet me back at this place so that we can continue to have these conversations. I look forward to seeing you soon. Blessings.